Welcome on this wonderful Tuesday afternoon. Hope you're excited to see what we have in store in terms of upgrading to VCF 9. My name is Sushil Suvarna. I'm a manager with the Solution Architecture team, and I have with me Kyle.
Hi, my name is Kyle Gleed. I'm part of the Cloud Foundation technical marketing team. Been working with Cloud Foundation for quite a while, going all the way back to the 2.0 release, so several years. And most recently, I've been focused on upgrades. So that's what we're here to talk about today.
All right, so let's kick it off today. It's a standard disclaimer in case we say something that we shouldn't be saying. This protects us from it. Let's go over the agenda for today, right? A lot of you have already heard about VCF 9. You might have heard bits and pieces about it. You're going to learn a lot more over the next few days. And the crux of the session today is to talk through how you actually move from where you are to VCF 9. So we'll do a few things. We'll level set with a bit of VCF 9 and what is VCF 9. We'll do a little bit of the design overview. Then we'll talk through what are some of the design considerations as you think about moving to VCF 9, what you need to be mindful of, and then we'll dive into it, right? We have two different source environments to talk through, coming from vSphere, going to VCF 9, and from VCF to VCF 9. So rather than focusing too much on purely slides, what we'll also do is the bulk of this session, it's a 90-minute session, and we want to keep you all entertained. We will walk through a few demos to show you exactly how the upgrade is done, right? So that will be part of what we do in the session as well. So before we get started, just in terms of polling the room, how many of you are actual VCF customers right now, actually deploying VCF? Okay, all right. So we'll talk through both the options. Here is a comprehensive list of all of the sessions that we have in terms of the design team. We talk a lot about the best practices of designing VCF. That's another session that William Lamb and I are co-presenting. We had one yesterday. There is another instance of that tomorrow. And we have a whole set of design sessions to talk about best practices with operations, even designs of VCF automation, etc. So just for your reference. Right, so we'll do a quick overview of VCF 9 in terms of the constructs. For those of you that are already on VCF, you might already be familiar with this, but for those that are not, it'll just be a quick refresher. The deep dive will be in the design session that we have separately with William and I. So as we thought about VCF and VMware Cloud Foundation, one of the key things we wanted to do was build a private cloud that's extensible enough to your infrastructure no matter where it is. Whether it is your own infrastructure, whether you're consuming it from a service provider or at the edge, right? So that's kind of what VCF 9 kind of envelopes over. Now you have your enterprise IT admin, a lot of the tasks that you already do in terms of managing and operating your infrastructure, whether it comes to things like managing capacity or understanding the actual behavior in terms of looking at what's going on under the covers. That's the first layer that comes on top of it, which is to build and operate your private cloud. And then we have another layer that layers on top of that, which is more for managing from a governance perspective. So how do you do role-based access? How do you manage policies, content? And in addition to that, one of the key things is how do you actually automate and operate? And this is where our new consumption layer kind of comes into the picture. So there's a whole lot of personas that interact with VCF. And we wanted to make sure that while we are integrating all of the core components behind the scenes, that we also take advantage of a lot of the pieces that we currently have in our collective portfolio. So a lot of the stuff that you'll see today, we'll talk about how we are actually reusing a lot of the components that we have. And this is where, for the build and operate part of private cloud, we have this layer of VCF operations that performs that task. VCF operations is the artist formerly known as ARIA operations, the artist formerly known as VROps. We love changing names, so that's what it's called now. And then for the consumption layer, we have VCF automation, which is the artist formerly known as ARIA automation or vRealize automation, right? We have these technologies in our portfolio we use them to build these two layers. So one of the fundamental changes that we made in VCF 9 was changing the mechanism through which we use VCF operations and build it into the future as the actual command system of your private cloud. So how many folks here are actually using VCF operations, or you could call it ARIA operations, just a show of hand, right? So a lot of you are already familiar with what it does today. It does your monitoring, troubleshooting, capacity management. It has all of those capabilities. The way you think about VCF operations also is more as a pure monitoring tool and troubleshooting tool, but there's a fundamental change in terms of what happens to VCF operations in the VCF 9 world. So in VCF 9, VCF operations does whatever it did before and more. So rather than just being the operate piece of your private cloud, it now manages your private cloud as well. There's a lot of new key capabilities that have been built into VCF operations. One of the main capabilities is around licensing. So with VCF 9, we've moved from a key-based licensing system to a keyless subscription-based licensing. So rather than you having to worry about how to feed keys into every single component that you have, everything is taken care of by a keyless subscription that flows through VCF operations. And in addition to that, it also does centralized password management, certificate management, lifecycle management, and also takes care of your role-based access. So VCF has now changed from a component that was purely monitoring to the command system that does both manage and operate. And because of that, it plays a unique role in terms of how you think about designing your infrastructure around VCF operations. There are a few new constructs that we have also created in VCF 9. Those that are already familiar with VCF know what a domain is and what an instance is. I'll go into that a little bit more subsequently, but we have a few newer constructs called a VCF fleet and the private cloud. So for a lot of you that are already either using VCF or thinking about VCF, you know what an instance is. It's a collection of compute, networking, and storage that comes together in a management domain, and then you can have a set of workload domains that are actually connected to it. You have a SDC manager behind the scenes that does the life cycle. So a lot of these constructs kind of remain similar to what an instance is in 9.0. There's another layer that comes on top of this in VCF 9, which is known as the VCF fleet. There's two key components that get added to what you're already familiar with. It's the manage and operate with VCF operations and the new consumption layer with VCF automation. So think of these two layers as the collective plane from which you'll manage one or more VCF instances under the covers. So we spoke about instance, went into fleet, and this is kind of what the logical view of a fleet looks like. You have the manage operate layer, the consumption layer, and the infrastructure under the covers. The key thing for us was to not make any of this disruptive to you, the user. So that's kind of why we want to make the transition from what you have to this new world as seamless as possible. And we'll look at that in a lot more detail to some of the upgrade flows. Now, you can have more than one fleet. It's purely up to you in terms of how you want to design your environment. So each fleet has its own ops and automation instances, but depending on your use cases and scenarios, you can have multiple fleets in your environment. Let's take a look at some of the key design considerations when you're thinking about VCF itself. There are multiple paths to get to VCF. You either can create something brand new. If you're starting fresh, just want to see what it's look like, that's create greenfield. Or you have two different upgrade paths. You have an upgrade path from vSphere and a combination of vSphere and all of the other components we have that falls under option 2. Or you can upgrade from VCF itself if you're a VCF 5 customer. So for the very first, in terms of the greenfield deployments, we're trying to think through the different design options that you might have to kind of think about how you want to set up ops and automation in this new world. So we have a set of these fleet designs. We go into a lot more detail in that design session we have, But just in terms of a quick recap, we want you to start thinking about resilience and availability for the key fleet components like ops and automation in this new world. And we, from the design perspective, give you those options and recommendations for what you should start thinking of from the basic setup, which is just a deployment that either has local protection for your appliances or starts moving into more resilient deployment topologies that are either active-active configurations with site-based HA or more stringent recovery from disasters with DR-based topologies, or a combination of all of the worlds put together. We want to give you the flexibility of how you want to design your environment. Whether it's a greenfield deployment or whether it's an upgrade, we want you to think about what your future world will look like, think about how you want to design it, and then accordingly plan for your upgrades. So now one question keeps coming up as we talk about these newer constructs. Now we're saying we have a fleet. The fleet is the essence of everything that the private cloud has to offer, and you have a single operations and you have a single automation. So how big or what does the operation scale look like when I have my infrastructure under the covers? Essentially, when should I build more than one fleet? Because each fleet has its own operations. So there are three factors that determine whether you need more than one fleet. The first is scale. Just like any component or appliance, VCF Ops has a limit. And we have some scale limits in terms of how much a single ops instance can actually stretch itself. The second is latency. There's a lot of scenarios that we've seen in customer environments where you have a specific data center in one place that you want to set up as your management data center that has ops, but you have multiple other data centers and you wanted to leverage the same ops rather than redeploying it. But there's a latency requirement there. So network connectivity becomes the second factor. And the third factor is just organizational placement. You might have requirements that are different for how you want your fleets to be designed. So you might want a separate one for production, you might want a separate one for dev test, or you might want a separate fleet altogether based on who is actually using it. So looking at these numbers a little deeper, from a latency requirement, you need the instances to be within 100 milliseconds of where ops is deployed. And I've listed some of the scale numbers there. These are all published on the website, just for reference in terms of how much VCF operations actually scales. We don't care about the number of instances that are available or present in a fleet. What VCF operations really cares about is what are the total number of objects and metrics that you have in your environment that it can actually manage. All right, so now let's start digging a little bit deeper into the upgrade workflows. We'll be talking about two different scenarios. We'll start with vSphere-based deployments first, and then we'll switch into VCF-based deployments. So option 2 is what we're going to focus on first. And one of the things that we did was we tried to collect information about the most common types of deployments that we see with vSphere. And they fell into these 4 categories where you can either have a self-managed vCenter, you could do the same with ELM or enhanced link mode. You could have a management vCenter that actually has multiple vCenters on it, and the same one with ELM as well. I'm going to show you pictorial depictions of what these actually look like. But when it comes to ELM or enhanced link mode, how many here actually use it? All right, so we'll talk a little bit about some of the newer capabilities that we are bringing in to also think about a transition from ELM. But let me go through the first scenario, right? So this is what a typical topology looks like for a self-managed vCenter. You have the vCenter that's managing all of the workloads on the cluster. It's analogous to what we used to call in the VCF days kind of a consolidated architecture. But you could have one or many deployments of these kind of vCenters, and they could be connected in ELM if you wanted that single pane of glass kind of view. What we'll do is we'll look at how a deployment like this, which basically does not have any operations, any automation, any NSX, just to give you kind of a representation of what it looks like for something like this to move into 9.0. So the first thing that happens in terms of actually moving to 9.0, you've got to make sure that you provision the extra set of resources that are required for VCF 9, but then you go ahead and you create your management domain. So you pick a vCenter that's kind of in your management cluster, and you go ahead and create your management domain. When you create your very first management domain in VCF 9, there's a few unique things that actually does happen. Because we're thinking about a VCF as kind of the overall private cloud itself, we want to make sure that you have NSX. Even if you don't want to use it, you have it, and it gets installed behind the scenes so that it gives you that the networking capabilities that you might require for subsequent workloads. So that's the first thing that happens. In addition to that, it goes ahead and deploys VCF operations and VCF automation. This is only done once for a fleet. And this is where you have gone and created your management domain. So for your other vCenters that exist, you can bring them in as a workload domain, and NSX comes along with that as well. When you connect all of these things together, you get a VCF fleet. So you started with what you had, you built on top of it, created your VCF instance, and went ahead and deployed a fleet. So as you see, a lot of what we are thinking about VCF 9 is basically just a little bit of a wrapper on the components that you already have. And this becomes your private cloud, right? So let's take a look at the similar example, but with the different topology, where you actually start from a topology that looks like this, where you have a management cluster where your VC is managing everything that's on there, but you also have other clusters on which your workloads are running, but the VCs that are managing those additional workloads are on the same one. This is analogous to what we would have called the standard architecture with VCF, but we see a lot of this even with vSphere deployments. So the progression is a lot similar here as well. The very first thing that happens is you pick your vCenter that you want to create in your management domain, and as you do that, you get NSX, you get VCF operations, and you get VCF automation. After that, you go ahead and start transitioning the rest of your vCenters as workload domains into this. The one key thing I wanted to mention, and Kyle also will go into this in detail, is that we understand that you want to take your time in terms of upgrading to any new version. So you don't do everything at once. So there are different steps at which you can actually pause through this upgrade process. So you can create a management domain, you can pause, you can import your workload domains whenever you want to. We give you that flexibility because we know the upgrade doesn't happen overnight. So these are all connected together, you get the fleet, and that's the private cloud. So the next thing that I'll talk a little bit about is how are we trying to bring all of the information together that helps you upgrade what you have to where you're going from. So we created specific insights for the different combinations that we saw in these topologies, and we came up with what we considered as some of the most common deployment types, right? You have ops, NSX, automation, vSAN, and we also see that in a lot of situations, of course, customers have VCF, like a lot of you currently do, but you've also deployed a lot of these components kind of a la carte that's equivalent to a full stack. So depending on the combinations you have, and you're moving to 9, we wanted to create the unique guidance for you to make it easy and seamless to move to 9. Because depending on what you have in your source environment, you can pick and choose what you want in terms of moving to the new world. So let's take a look at some of the upgrade considerations, right? The very first thing that you need to do is you go and check the Broadcom compatibility guide, which used to be known as a VMware compatibility guide, but ensure that whatever hardware you have is compatible with VCF 9. We'll now look at the most simplest of paths where we're assuming that there is an environment that only has vSphere, that means vCenter and ESX, and none of the other products. So we're going to talk through what happens when you have a certain feature or a component that is in a vSphere deployment, and what happens to it as it transitions or moves to VCF 9. So the very first thing is licensing. As soon as you move to VCF 9, the key-based licensing is not something that is required anymore. You move to keyless licensing. The second thing is if you have DRS configured, whether it's in manual or automated mode, it automatically gets set to fully automated during your move to VCF 9. You can switch it back if you want to. If you have vCHA or vCenter high availability, how many folks really have this configured? Okay, a few, right. So if you do have that and you want to upgrade, you can, but you're going to disable it first and then perform the upgrade to 9, and then you'll have to reconfigure it. The only caveat is you'll have to manage lifecycle through vCenter rather than SDC manager. Whether you have a single or multiple cluster configuration coming in, makes no difference. All of that is supported. So enhanced link mode, if you have it configured in your source environment in vSphere coming in, you have to disable it and move to vSphere 9. So enhanced link mode is deprecated in vSphere 9, but deprecation doesn't mean it's gone away. Deprecation just means it's an intent for us to replace it with something else. And the something else exists in VCF 9. So we have a lot of equivalent capability in VCF 9. We have a notion of vCenter groups that gives you the single pane of glass view. We have things where ops now manages tags. We have SSO with a VIDP component that offers SSO across all the components. So we want to give you a lot of that equivalent functionality so that you get familiar with it at some point of time when this eventually goes away. In terms of the networking management domain, like I already showed earlier, doesn't matter where you come from, NSX gets deployed. The same for the workload domain as well. Moving on, there's no impact to storage. Whatever storage you have coming in, everything is the same. If you do not have ARIA operations or VCF operations in your environment, it actually gets deployed as you move to VCF 9. The same thing for automation as well. If you don't have it in your source environment, it gets deployed. Containers and Kubernetes, no impact. We have a whole lot of capabilities that are available through VCF automation that you can use. And there's a notion where FIPS, whether it's enabled or disabled, gets enabled during a vCenter upgrade. So here are some of the key things that kind of change when you move from a vSphere-only environment to VCF 9. Now let's add on a little bit to it, right? What happens if you are coming from an environment where you have vSphere along with VCF operations to it, right? So when you are moving to 9, you get the choice of using or reusing any of the existing components in your management domain. So if you come from a place where you have vSphere with operations configured, you can choose to select that vCenter and that operations and use the same in your new management domain, right? You can choose to, if you want to deploy a whole new operations, that's also fine. We give you that flexibility altogether. The reason why there is no build on this slide is because there is no change from what I showed earlier. Everything remains the same. The one difference I wanted to talk about is that depending on the kind of ops deployment that you have in your source environment, you might want to think a little bit about how you move. So if you have multiple operations deployment in your current environment, just a show of hands, how many people currently have multiple VCF operations deployed? All right, just a few, right. So you have a few choices, right? A fleet in the 9.0 world only can have one operations. So if you have multiple operations right now, it's fully supported, you can create multiple fleets in VCF 9. Or you can choose to figure out how to consolidate them into a single operations and then bring it to 9. The other option is you can get your primary VCF operations and move it to VCF 9, and the rest of them can remain just as they are and continue to work. No change for any of the other components either. So what we'll do now is, because we went through some of this for vSphere, we have a lot of different combinations as well for vSphere with other components, but because we want to focus a little bit on actually how to do the upgrade, we're going to switch into a demo to actually show you what happens there. And I'm going to hand it over to Kyle right now.
All right, thank you. Before we jump into the demo, I'm just kind of curious. Is anybody here running VCF 9 now? One person in the lab. Did you do a greenfield or an upgrade? Greenfield. So nobody else is running 9. So this should be, we got somebody else over here running 9. Okay. So in my role, one of the things I was asked to do early on was to basically start thinking about the upgrade paths and start thinking about all the different combinations of products that our customers are going to have and what that path is going to be to upgrade. And there's many, many paths. There's way more than 3. But what I did is I identified what I felt were probably the top 3. And these are what I've been targeting. So you'll notice the first one here. We're talking about a vSphere environment. And this is a vSphere environment that does not currently have ARIA operations running. So it's just kind of a standard vCenter with some vSphere clusters, and they're going to VCF 9. The second scenario, well, let me stop here. So how many of you think does this describe you? Okay, good number there. Okay, now you'll notice here the upgrade down below. I'm not going to go through this in detail just yet, but the upgrade down here is really divided into kind of 3 phases. The first phase, you go out, you upgrade your vSphere environment, your vSphere 8.x environment up to vSphere 9. Okay, so you're going to manually do that. And then after you've upgraded the 9, you're going to install this component called the VCF installer. And then you're going to use the VCF installer to then take that vSphere environment that you upgraded the 9 and convert it into a VCF fleet. And it's going to take care of all the work of deploying the ops collector, deploying the automation, configuring NSX for you. So it's really a pretty straightforward process. We have the VCF installer. If you haven't seen it, I think you'll really like it. It's pretty impressive in what it does for us. Then once we've done the upgrade, we then go to ops and we relicense, and then we move on those post-upgrade activities. So as you can see, a vSphere-only environment, you start with your vSphere upgrade. Now, what if I'm a shop that has vSphere plus ARIA operations? So how many of you fall in this category? Okay, looks like a good number of you. Notice that the path changes slightly. Because I have operations running, I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to start by upgrading my ops 8.18 or 8.x version up to ops 9 first. Then I'm going to go and do my vSphere upgrade. And then when I get to the VCF installer, I can tell the VCF installer to take my vCenter and my existing ops and converge that into my management domain and make my VCF fleet. So same basic process, but the order does change because I have operations. Now in this third scenario, very similar to the second scenario, but in this example, instead of a standalone ops, I also have the ARIA Suite Lifecycle Manager. So how many of you have ops with the ARIA Suite Lifecycle Manager? So a good number of you. Notice here, the path changes again slightly. Because I have the ARIA Suite Lifecycle, I'm going to use the ARIA Suite Lifecycle to patch and upgrade my ARIA operations to 9. In addition, it's going to deploy something called this fleet management appliance for me. I'm going to do that up front, and then I'm going to use the VCF installer, bring those environments in, and create my management domain. So you're going to see as we go through these demos, it's going to be kind of a rinse and repeat. There's going to be a little bit of repetition, so hopefully that won't be too much. But you'll notice that the order does change depending on your starting state. So one of the key takeaways I hope you get from this is the path from vSphere to VCF 9 depends on what components I'm running. But regardless of what components I have a path forward. Okay. So, and this third example is what we're going to step through, and I'm going to walk you through a demo of how I upgraded my lab environment from vSphere 8 running ARIA LCM with ARIA Ops. I could be running ARIA Automation, I could be running VIDM, I could be running other components as well, but just for simplicity and because I'm marketing, I had to be able to fit everything on a slide. I kind of just kept it simple. So step 1, I need to upgrade ARIA LCM. I need to update it to patch 2. So ARIA LCM 8.18 does not have any awareness of VCF 9. I can't use it to upgrade ops to 9. I need this patch 2. So we're going to go ahead now. I'm going to come over here to the demo, and I'm going to go ahead and jump in. So I need to patch my ARIA LCM. So if you're familiar with ARIA LCM, this is kind of the environment screen here. I'm going to come in here. I'm just going to go and show you that I'm running version 8.18. And as I said, the requirement is I need to go to 8.18 patch 2 or higher. So if you're on patch 3 or whatever, it includes patch 2. So to do this, I'm going to go down to settings. I'm going to go into my system patches, and I'm going to do a new patch. And here's my patch 2. Now, behind the scenes, I SCP'd the patch up to the ARIA LCM, put it in the data directory, and uploaded the binary. So there is a little bit of stuff going on behind the scenes, but for the most part, that's it. Okay. And one thing to keep in mind, this caught me by surprise, is once you patch it, it will automatically reboot. And thanks to the power of time travel, we're done. Okay, so now I'm in my ARIA suite lifecycle. It's rebooted. I'm going to log back in, and I'm going to come up here, and I'm going to show you that, yep, I'm now running this patch 2. So pretty straightforward. It required a reboot. In reality, I think it took like 5 minutes to do the patch. Pretty simple patch. But now I've gone ahead, I've patched it. So now what that means is ARIA LCM now has the awareness of VCF 9. So I can go in and I can use it to upgrade my ARIA operations. Now, in addition to upgrading ARIA operations, it's going to deploy a new component called the Fleet Manager. Okay, you can think of the Fleet Manager as the new version of ARIA LCM. So the ARIA LCM still exists. The Fleet Manager takes over, and it replaces that going forward. So to do that, I'll come back here to the demo, and I'll go into here, and you'll notice in my environment, I have a single site called Draper. And in this site, I have 2 components deployed, logs and operations, both of which are running 8.18. So I'm going to go ahead now, and behind the scenes, I have copied the binaries up to the ARIA LCM. So I copied 2 binaries. I copied the ARIA operations 9.0 upgrade pack file, and then I copied the OVA for the Fleet Manager. So those are staged, ready to go. So I'll go ahead and do the upgrade. Go here, proceed with the upgrade. And you'll see that it knows based on the binaries uploaded what I'm upgrading to. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to specify I'm using VMware Cloud Foundation as opposed to VVF. Run a quick, brief assessment, make sure everything's looking good. We do a lot of assessments, a lot of pre-checks as we go through the upgrade to kind of help make sure we have success. Now, at this point, it's asking me for infrastructure, and it's asking me for a vCenter, it's asking me for a network, a data store. This is asking me, where are you going to deploy the Fleet Manager? So here you'll see I'm going to deploy it in my management vCenter. I give it the information, and down here is the VM name, the fully qualified domain name, and the address of my fleet management. So I provide that. I'm going to go ahead, provide some networking, standard networking with DNS, NTP, gateway, subnet, and I'll run a more exhaustive pre-check. Now here in my example, I do have a warning. This warning is basically telling me, hey, your lab is undersized, so we can ignore that. But anyways, we'll go ahead now and we'll do the upgrade. And so this is just kind of standard. And you'll see it's got 13 stages it's going to go through. It's going to take the cluster offline. It's going to do the upgrade. It will bring it online. Then after it's done, it will move on to the step where it deploys the OVF template. And so then if I go out here to my vSphere client, here we can see I got this new Fleet Manager appliance being deployed. And it's going to run alongside that ARIA LCM. Okay? And so once that's done, I come back and you'll see the upgrade is done. But you'll notice now, I've upgraded ops from 8.18 to 9. I go into my environment, and guess what? Ops is gone because it was deregistered from ARIA LCM, and it was registered with the Fleet Manager appliance. So now, in order to view it, I go into VCF operations. And here I'm going to log into VCF operations, where here we can see I am running version 9. And we have the fleet management capabilities over here to us. Okay. So we took care of steps 1 and 2. I've upgraded my ARIA operations. I'm running on 9. I got my fleet management. So now I'm going to go ahead and do my vSphere upgrade. Now, as Sushil mentioned, well, I think you mentioned this, but as part of your vSphere upgrade, you will need to make that transition from VUM, vSphere Update Manager, or what we call VLCM baselines, to images. Is anybody here still running VUM? Okay, so it's a heads up there. You'll need to make that transition. In my lab, I'm already using images, so I'll go ahead and I'm going to skip over that step. We're not going to go into that in the demo, but now I'm going to upgrade to vSphere 9. So upgrading to vSphere 9 is just pretty straightforward. In my lab, what I did is I just went out and I downloaded the vCenter ISO, and I just used it to do upgrade vCenter, clicked upgrade. I'm going to skip through the vCenter upgrade because I'm guessing you guys have probably done more vCenter upgrades than I have. But it's basically I deployed a new appliance using a temporary IP address. I copied the data over, well, I didn't do it, but the upgrade did it. And then transitioned it over, shut down the old one, brought the new one, and the upgrade is complete. So here you'll see that's done there. And so now when I log in to my vSphere, not a lot of changes here between 8 and 9, but you can see in my inventory here, I am running vCenter 9.0. Okay. So the second part of the vSphere upgrade is upgrade ESX. So I need to get my ESX host up to 9. So if I come down here in my cluster, I can see here I'm currently running 8.0 update 2, I believe. Yes, right there. So I'm going to need to build a 9.0 image. Okay, so how do I build a 9.0 image? So with vSphere 9, I can come over here and I can go down to the lifecycle manager. I come in here where I can basically go to actions and we'll import. And I'll go out and find that 9.0 depot. I'm basically just going to import this. And then once it's imported, we'll see it listed here. Now I can go ahead and create a new image. And I'm just going to call this ESX9 with the build number, give it 9, do a quick validation, and then save it. Okay, so now I have my image. So now I can come back here to my cluster. And to do the upgrade, I'm simply going to come in here. I'm going to edit my image. I'm going to say, hey, I need to be running 9. And I'm going to save that. It's going to go out and it's going to say, hey, you got 4 hosts in the cluster. You told me they need to be running ESX9. They're running ESX 8.0, so they're non-compliant. So we see that down here in the non-compliant. And so in order to do the upgrade, I'm basically coming here and just do remediate. Okay. Now, this remediation is pretty straightforward. It's going to basically go through each host in the cluster one at a time, put it in maintenance mode, evacuate the VMs, do the update, reboot it. When it comes back, it does a check, make sure the update was good, and then it'll take it out of maintenance mode and then go to the next host. And so obviously that's going to take a little bit of time. And so again, to the wonderful magic of demos, we're going to jump forward to the end, and we'll see here that all hosts are compliant. Okay. And so if we come back here to my host, we can see that it is running 9.0. Okay, so we're upgrading to VCF 9. We're basically creating a VCF 9 fleet. So far, we've upgraded our ops to 9. We've deployed a fleet manager. We've upgraded our vSphere to 9. So now we're going to introduce the VCF installer. So the VCF installer, we're going to deploy it. And this is just a note to self. Reminder here, when you upgrade vSphere, keep in mind if you're using vSAN, there is a disk version associated in vSAN. Also, in your vSphere distributed switches, there is a VDS version associated with the distributed switch. Pay attention to those. You want to go in and upgrade those as well. I've seen a lot of people who have upgraded from 6.7 to 7 to 8, but they never upgraded their VDS versions, and that can kind of bite you a little bit. So I'm not going to show that here in the demo just for sake of time. But once that's done, we'll go ahead and we'll deploy the VCF installer. Okay, now when I deploy the VCF installer, let me go ahead and do that. So I'm going to come back here. I'm just going to go into my inventory, go under Actions, Deploy OVF Template. Now, I'm going to click on this, Upload Files. Okay, I know you can't read that, but if you could read that, it would basically be a list of OVAs, and one thing that I would highlight is you're not going to see an OVA named VCF installer. The OVA that I'm looking for is named VCF SDDC Manager. When you go to Broadcom, support.broadcom.com, and you go to the downloads, and you click on VCF installer, it's going to download the SDDC Manager. The VCF installer is part of the SDDC Manager appliance. And that's important, and I'm going to point it out as we go through the demo for a couple of reasons, because it is bundled with the same appliance that is the SDDC Manager. And it's going to start off as the installer, and it's going to change its personality and become the SDDC Manager. Because of that change, when I name this and I sign an IP address and I go into DNS, I want to be aware of that because I want to name it for that end state. I don't want to deploy it and suddenly my SDDC manager is called VCF installer because that could be confusing. So just keep that in mind. So I'm going to download what's called the VCF installer, which is actually the SDDC manager. And anybody think we could have made that a little bit more confusing? Okay, so we'll take that feedback. But yeah, that kind of tripped me up a few times until I realized what was going on there. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead, and this is why I'm kind of pointing this out, because you'll notice I'm naming this the SDDC manager, because I know it's going to take on the SDDC manager role as part of the upgrade. So I'm going to go ahead and be proactive in that naming. Okay, so I go ahead and deploy it. There it is, my SDDC manager, or AKA VCF installer, and I'm going to power that guy on. Once it powers on, I'm going to go out, open up a new browser tab, and I'm just going to connect to it. And here I am. I'm connected to my new VCF 9 installer. I really love this appliance. I think it's pretty slick, all the stuff it's doing behind the scenes. If you're an existing VCF customer, you may be familiar with something called the Cloud Builder. This is the new version of the Cloud Builder. It replaces the Cloud Builder. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and log in. Okay, I'm logged in, and now we're ready to get to the next step, where once I deploy it, I need to download the binaries. If you're a VCF customer, how big was the Cloud Builder when you downloaded it? About 30, 35 gig. It was huge. Okay, why was it so big? Well, because we included all the binaries with it. With the VCF installer, it's about 2 gig in size. We don't include the binaries, and so one of the first things you need to do after you download it is you have to download the binaries. A couple of benefits to this: we don't end up shipping stagnant binaries around. You always get the latest binaries every time, and it also makes it smaller and easier to deploy. So when I go to when I download the binaries, I go into the depot settings here, and you'll notice I have an option for both an online as well as an offline depot. So if you're a dark site, or if you're a site that doesn't want to connect to the internet, that's fine. You can set up an offline depot, and if you're, well, there's pros and cons to either way. Just know they're both supported. I'm going to go ahead and use the online depot because it's easy. I'm going to click configure. I'm going to grab my download token, pop it in there, click authenticate. And it's going to go out to that online depot, and it's going to come back and say, okay, here's a list of available binaries, and I'm going to go ahead and download these. And if you go through and do the quick math on this, you'll see it's just a little over 50 gig, but I'm going to go ahead and download this. The Wi-Fi here is pretty impressive, as you'll see. I got that down. So yes, we got our binaries. So we are in good shape there. We got our binaries downloaded. Okay, so now we're kind of done, and now we're going to shift gears. Now we're going to shift over to the VCF installer, and we're going to use the VCF installer to build our VCF fleet using our existing vCenter and our existing ops. So I'm going to go ahead now, and I'm going to do all this. Notice step 8 includes a lot of things because that installer is doing a lot of things behind the scenes. It's going to take our vCenter and our ops and make a VCF instance, a VCF fleet. And we're going to call that converge. So if you're in the documentation and you're like, what's this converge word? It's taking existing components and bringing them into the VCF fleet. It's going to deploy an operations collector. It's going to deploy NSX. It's going to configure the SDDC manager. It doesn't say deploy, it's going to configure, because what it's going to do is it's going to take the installer, reconfigure itself to become the SDDC manager. And in this example, we're also going to use it to deploy an instance of VCF automation. So let's go ahead and complete that. So I go down here to my deployment wizard. I click on VMware Cloud Foundation. It's asking me, hey, are you doing a new fleet or a new instance? So if I've already got an instance of operations and automation established in a fleet, I can go ahead and deploy I can make this a new management domain instance inside of that existing fleet. In this example, we're starting from scratch, so we're going to go ahead and deploy a new fleet. I'll go ahead and click continue. It's asking me if I have any existing components. If this is greenfield, I'm going to say no, but because I'm doing an upgrade, because I'm taking existing components, I'm going to say yes. I'm bringing in existing VCF operations and existing vCenter. And now it's going to ask me some high-level information. So basically the version of stuff, the thing I'd call out on this screen is this deployment model. I have a session tomorrow at 12:15 where I'm going to go into detail about this, but essentially when you deploy Cloud Foundation, there's 2 models. There's a simple model, there's a high availability model. The simple model has a smaller footprint, or the high availability has a larger footprint. We deploy single node NSX managers, single node operations, single node automation versus multi-node. So we do have some flexibility there. We do have the ability to kind of start with a smaller footprint. You can scale up as you go. So we're going to go ahead and do a simple deployment here. I'm going to go ahead and it's going to ask, because I have existing components, it's going to ask me for those credentials, make sure I got the right components. And you'll notice here, it's asking me for the operations collector. So this appliance for the fleet manager, that was already deployed as part of our ops upgrade, but now it's going to deploy a third appliance, the operations collector. So we provide those details. And then it's going to go out, verify the fleet manager, and then we come into our vCenter, verify that, and it's going to deploy NSX. Okay, so if, who here is using NSX? Okay, good number of you. If you're not using NSX, don't feel intimidated, don't feel like, oh, I gotta figure out this NSX. It's going to deploy the NSX management cluster. It's going to deploy these VMs, it's going to configure NSX. There's really not much you need to worry about at this point. If you're not ready to adopt virtual networking, just know it's putting the plumbing in place. And it's pretty transparent. You'll see there's not a lot of details it's asking me. This question here about using the management for overlay is probably the trickiest part. And it's basically just saying, hey, with NSX, we have this concept of tunnel endpoints. And it's basically saying, hey, do you want to go ahead and configure these on your management network out the gate? And then, you can change those later on. But we're going to go ahead and deploy NSX as part of this. And then we're going to basically provide the credentials for the VCF installer. This blue box here basically says what I just said about how we're going to flip that role. So just that's it. And we're going to go ahead and click next. And then we can go ahead and review the environment. One thing I want to point out is you'll notice we have the option here to view this in a JSON, and we also have the option to download the JSON spec. So if you're somebody who's going to be doing a lot of deployments and you want to do some customization through JSON, a lot of existing VCF customers do that today, you can do that, and you can actually use the VCF installer to build that JSON spec that you can then save and modify going forward. Okay, so that's kind of that. And now we're going to go ahead and do a validation. This validation in reality takes about 10 to 15 minutes in my environment. It's pretty extensive. It's going out and doing a lot of checks. If you get warnings, you'll see I got a couple of warnings here about some compatibility checks and about some standard switches left behind and stuff. These are just warnings. Warnings I can ignore, so I can basically look at those and acknowledge, and I can proceed. If you get an error, you'll need to fix the error. The error will not let you proceed. So if you get an error, you have to go troubleshoot it, resolve it, come back, and you see I got this option in here to rerun the validations. I can just rerun it. But once I'm good, I go ahead and do the deploy. And then the VCF installer is going to go ahead and deploy the VCF fleet. And so now if we come in here and you look at everything that's gone on, it basically took that existing vCenter, made a new VCF instance, it deployed NSX, configured that VCF installer to become my SDDC manager. It then joined it to the VCF fleet, and then it joined the operations instance and deployed the automation appliance. I do have an audit trail here of everything that happened and the timeline that happened. So in reality, this took maybe about 2 hours, I think, and about an hour that was deploying automation. But now I'm done. I log into VCF operations, which we upgraded before. And now we can come in here and we can see, if I go into my inventory, we now have our vCenter server there. Okay, so we have just upgraded a vSphere environment from the vSphere 8.0 update 2, which was running with ARIA operations 8.18 to version 9. So in reality, obviously we sped things up for the demo. In reality, it took me, it's about 4 or 5 hours, I would guess, to do the upgrade end to end with no distractions. I did this over time. I upgraded vCenter, and then I came back the next day, upgraded my ESX host. So it was spread out over time. But that's pretty much the process. Now, one thing that we touched on earlier was the change in licensing. So if I come back to my demo, you'll see this yellow banner across the top. It basically says, hey, you're in evaluation mode. When I upgrade from vSphere 8 to vSphere 9, it automatically puts vCenter and ESX into evaluation mode. It's a 90-day evaluation mode. You have 90 days to license it. And so that's the next step. So the next step is to license. And I'm not going to go through the licensing here at this stage. I'm going to cover that when we get to the next demo on VCF, just to try and avoid some of the duplication and some of the time. But yeah, so that's pretty much it. If I come back here, let me just kind of show you the inventory. I want to show this inventory here. You'll see here's the inventory of what's in my management domain after I completed the upgrade. So you'll notice there are new components that will get deployed. So when you are thinking about which vCenter instance, which cluster do I want to become my new management domain, remember, there's going to be additional components deployed. Do you have the capacity for it? Do you have the space for it? But we see we have the ARIA LCM, that's left behind. That's still managing my ARIA logs instance. I had ARIA logs 18, it's still running, it's still managing that. If I had VIDM, it's still there. So that's still there. It's still, until I don't need it any longer, it will keep it. We deployed the fleet manager, we got the NSX manager, we got the ops, the logs again is being managed by ARIA LCM, and then I had 4 VMs. Those 4 VMs, they were running the whole time. There was no downtime. This was non-disruptive. Even through the vSphere upgrade because I used maintenance mode. Okay, so if you come back here, so the next step is to use VCF ops to relicense, and now we can go into our post-upgrade activities. So I had to break enhanced link mode because that was a requirement. Now I've upgraded to 9. I want to re-enable enhanced link mode. How do I do that? Well, you go into ops, you set up your vCenter linking, you set up your VCF SSO with your SSO groups, and now you can get your single pane of glass back. And you can go in and do other things like deploy other products, and things like that. So that takes us to, is that the slides? Yeah. That brings us up to VCF. So that's the vSphere upgrade. So we do have some questions. Let's kind of hold the questions till we get to the end, just because we're a little sensitive to time. I think we'll be able to have time for the questions after we're done. But I think I'm handing it back off to you to kind of kick off, and then we'll get into the VCF upgrade example.
All right, so depending on whether you're a fan of the Marvel universe or the DC universe, Kyle is essentially our Quicksilver or Flash equivalent, because he can do upgrades in record time. So if you have any questions about how he does this so fast, please reach out to him after the session. So let's go to the third option that we have in terms of upgrading from VCF to VCF 9. So a lot of this kind of remains similar to what we had earlier. So I'll just run through it just to make sure there aren't any deltas. So licensing, like we said, it changes to subscription-based licensing. The same note as earlier for vSphere DRS. WUM is supported in VCF 5, and as we mentioned, you need to move to VLCM or transition to that. We also have enhanced link mode. Now, the key thing is if you are using VCF and you have ELM configured, you can actually move that over to VCF 9. You don't have to actually break ELM if you're on VCF 5 to do that. For networking with the management domain, no change and no impact. The same for networking in the workload domain. In terms of storage, no impact, no change there whatsoever. If you do not have ARIA operations, then it gets deployed when you actually move to VCF 9. The same with ARIA automation as well. If you have ARIA Suite Lifecycle, essentially you get Fleet Manager in VCF 9. And the same node that we had earlier for containers and Kubernetes is not deployed. You can actually use that and get that through VCF automation. The same node for FIPS as well. If it's either enabled or disabled, you can enable it. It gets enabled during the actual vCenter upgrade of moving over to VCF 9. So we spoke a lot about vSphere transitioning and moving to VCF 9. What we're going to do next is, for the rest of the session, we'll look at a little bit of a demonstration of moving from VCF to VCF 9.
So apparently a lot of people were vSphere people. They're not really interested in VCF just yet. Hopefully that will change. Okay, so kind of a similar thing here. I looked at 3 common, situations. So we can have an existing VCF customer running VCF 5.x and above. I think here I'm calling out 5.2, but you can upgrade from 5.0 up. You can do skip level upgrade. There's no need to go from 5.0 to 5.1 to 5.2. But you can have VCF running with your management domain without any of the ARIA suite. So that's the first situation. In addition, we could have VCF running with a standalone instance of ARIA operations, and then we could have VCF running with the ARIA suite, and that ARIA suite can be deployed in either, separate from VCF or in what we call VCF aware mode. So these are the 3 common scenarios, and we'll kind of go through these. You'll notice here is when we go through this, again, just like we've seen before, the significance of whether or not you have ops and whether or not you have ARIA LCM is important because that's going to affect your upgrade path. So here you'll see if I just have VCF running without an instance of ARIA operations or an instance of the ARIA suite lifecycle, I just basically jump right into the SDDC manager and I use the SDDC manager to do my upgrade. Okay, and then after I've done that, I'll switch gears over to vSphere and I'll take care of deploying some additional components. So where the installer took care of things for me, the SDDC manager doesn't deploy these additional components. I need to go manually deploy them. And then we go into VCF operations and wrap up the configuration. Okay, and then we'll get into the licensing. In the second scenario, just as we've seen before, if you have ops, you'll need to start by upgrading ops to 9. Okay, then once it's upgraded to 9, we'll manually deploy fleet. Okay, and then the upgrade path kind of goes forward. And then the third scenario is similar to what we just seen where you have the ARIA suite. So we'll start by applying that patch and going forward. So we're gonna go ahead and go through this upgrade scenario here. And it's gonna be, like I say, a little bit of repeat, but once we get past these first 2 steps, we'll get into the SDDC manager and we'll see what that upgrade path is like for VCF. Okay, so the first thing is we need to upgrade ARIA LCM. That's going to be the exact same as what we saw before. And then we're going to we're going to use it to upgrade ops, and when we upgrade ops, we deploy Fleet Manager. Those first 2 steps are the same as what we see in the previous demo. I could go over them again, but I think for sake of time and stuff, since we've already completed those first 2 steps, we're going to go ahead and we're going to pick up with step 3 here, where we're going to go to the SDDC Manager. Okay. So the SDDC Manager is running 5.2. And so here I am, I'm in my SDDC Manager. And I go down here to the SDDC Manager and Lifecycle Management, and you'll see it's running 5.2. And it's notifying me that I do have a 9.0 update bundle available. So step 1, I need to update the SDDC Manager. And if you remember with 5.2, one of the things we did is we kind of decoupled the SDDC Manager from the rest of the BOM so we can update it independently. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm just going to download it. It's 2 gig download. I'm going to run the pre-check. And you see here that the pre-check's done, and then I'll go ahead and do the update. And we'll start the upgrade. And if you've upgraded versions of VCF in the past, you'll be familiar with this screen, but essentially what it's going to do now is, because we're updating the SDDC Manager, it kind of shuts down the UI, gives us this screen, goes through. It will reboot the SDDC Manager. And so we'll go ahead, and when that reboot's done, we'll come back, we'll log back in, and we'll see here, we're now running the upgraded version of SDDC Manager, as evident by coming back in here and seeing that it's notifying us that we are running the latest version. Okay, so that's step 1, update the SDDC Manager. Now, if we come back here to the demo, step 2, I download the SDDC Manager. Okay, I got ahead of myself. So I did have to download the bundle. It was already there because I have an online depot upgraded it. So now we'll go to the next step. Download the NSX, vCenter, and ESX binaries. Okay, anything stand out with that comment? We're downloading binaries. Where's my existing VCF customers? Don't we usually call those bundles? Well, with VCF 9, we're moved away from the concept of a bundle. We're now downloading binaries directly. So the significance of that is in the past with VCF, if the vSphere came out with an update or NSX came out with an update, say on September 1st, you'd be like, okay, when's it going to be available on VCF? And we would need extra time to take those updates, roll them into a bundle, and make the bundles available to the SDDC Manager. Well, we no longer had that now, because once the binaries are available, we pull the binaries down. So we're not dealing with bundles anymore. We are working with binaries. And so that's a nice improvement. And so we'll go ahead now, and when I go into lifecycle management, you'll see now that I'm on 9, in addition to all these warnings about, hey, SDC Manager UI is being deprecated and things like that, I see down here in the binary management, here I download and I have binaries for my update binaries, my install binaries, as well as my patch binaries. So we came out with a 9.01 patch already, and you see that's here. That's actually an ESX live patch, and you'll see that here. So we'll go ahead and we'll download the binaries. And then once the binaries are downloaded, and I have my upgrade binaries for my NSX, my vCenter, and my ESX, I can go ahead now and I can do the upgrade. Now here, we have an existing management domain, so we need to go into the workload domains to do the upgrade. So we'll go into workload domains, select my management domain. You'll see here, it's already flagged. I got some updates available. So I'll go ahead and select those updates, and I'll scroll down here. And because I updated the SDC Manager to 9.0, it knows that my upgrade plan is I'm going to 9.0. So he's already built out my plan, and the SDC Manager is going to basically show me, okay, here's the steps you need to do to complete your upgrade. And it's going to tell me the order. You know, this gets back to the value of the SDC Manager and having this orchestrated upgrade. I don't have to worry about interoperability between vCenter and NSX and what comes first. You know, do I upgrade one or the other? I just let the SDC Manager guide me. So the first step is the SDC Manager, the NSX. So let's go ahead and let's do that. So we'll see, we come down here. It's already, the updates, binaries are there, it's ready to go. So I'm gonna go ahead and configure the update. It's gonna go through, it's gonna basically configure the update, and then it's gonna take me through a workflow to schedule the update. And so when I have NSX, you know, there's, if I have NSX edge clusters, I can have multiple clusters. Do I wanna do them all at once? In parallel? Do I want to do them sequentially? Do I want to select a specific NSX edge cluster? So it's basically asking me my options here. I've only got one edge cluster, so I'm just going to go ahead and go with the defaults here. And then it's going to run pre-checks. So like I said, we do a lot of pre-checking, a lot of checking as we step through, looking for issues that could be problems. You want to make sure those pre-checks complete successfully. And then once it's done, I can schedule the update. I guess I'm going to go into the view, the details of the update here, just to show you what that looks like. And then we'll go back to scheduling the update. Okay, I'm going to do the update now. And we'll go ahead and the update will go down to the in progress state, and I can view the status. And an hour and 48 minutes and 27 seconds later, my NSX has been upgraded. Okay, so you'll notice it went in and updated what we call the NSX upgrade coordinator, the management cluster, so the VIBs on the host. It updated the edge cluster as well. One kind of side note here is going forward with VCF 9 and forward, the VIBs are now part of ESX, the NSX VIBs. So there's no longer a separate step of pushing those VIBs out to the host and things like that. So we should see some improvements in this going forward because the VIBs are now part of it. But now we're up and running. We've got the NSX updated. So we can go back to the next step in our upgrade path, which is to update vCenter. Okay, and just as we saw before, this is where it gets into the rinse and repeat, the update stage. We can go ahead and configure it. It's going to do the reduced downtime upgrade, so it's basically going to deploy a new vCenter server on a temporary IP address, copy the configuration over, switch it over. And so it's making me verify that I have taken a backup of my vCenter, and it's asking me how do I want to handle the IP addressing. I'm going to use automatic, which is essentially DHCP. And then when do I want to do that switch over? And I'm just going to go ahead and do it immediately. So if you wanted to like stage, get the second vCenter deployed, and then later on at a certain time, make that, shut the vCenter down and make that transition, this is what it's basically asking you to do. Okay. And we'll go ahead and view the status of this and look at that. An hour and 25 minutes later, we're done. So it does take some time. And to Shashil's point earlier about how you can kind of stagger this thing over, you know, we realize you're not going to be able to update everything at once. This is a simple is this 4 node or 6 node? I think this might be a 6 node cluster. But if you got like a 12, 32 node cluster, you might need to spread it across separate maintenance windows. But again, we have the SDDC manager here. It's guiding through this process, kind of orchestrating things for us. And so now the last step is to update our ESX host. And so for that, we'll go ahead and move on to that. But before we can do that, we do have to have our ESX image. So I'm trying to remember where my demo went from here. Okay, so here's the ESX. Yeah, I think I cut that part out of the demo. Yeah, so there is a step here where I have to go out, and similar to what we've seen in the previous demo where I had to go out and create my ESX, I had to download the depot, create the image, and then I have to import the image into SDDC Manager. So I debated on whether to keep that step in there or take it out, and so I took it out. But you do need to create that image, and that image is created in vSphere. Remember, the SDDC Manager is just using VLCM. So you still have to go into VLCM, create your images, have them available, import those. And if you look in the SDDC Manager UI over here, it's grayed out. You'll see there's an image management. That's where you import those images. But once you have that image available, I come in here and I basically go in here and this is where I assign the image. So usually here what happens is I log in, I go get my image and I'm like, oh, I don't have an image, so I have to go back to vSphere, create the image and import it. So, but we did that, so we'll go ahead and proceed with the update. Okay, and so here we see the update starts. Actually, so I schedule it, I configured it, now I need to schedule it. So I go into schedule the update. I'm gonna update now, verify I've met all the requirements, and then I see the update kick off, and I can view the status. Okay, so now here, this took us 46 minutes. Your time will vary. The big thing here is how long it takes to reboot your host. It takes each host. Some of the common questions we get is, hey, can I determine which host to update, in which order? And the answer is no. What happens is the SDDC manager is going to go out, consult, well, VLCM is going to go out, consult DRS and ask for a recommendation and take the host that it recommends. That will be the first host. So in this example, I think it did host 3 first. Puts it in maintenance mode, evacuates the VMs, applies the update, reboots the host, it comes back, takes it out of maintenance mode, and it goes through that process that we've seen before. And then we'll go on to the next host, the next host, the next host. And so here you'll see the update is done. So you'll notice here I got 8 errors. So that's that. It's actually supposed to be orange, but it doesn't look like it's on the screen. But it's I got 8 errors. So what do you think these errors are? I just upgraded ESX, and now I got 8 errors. What do you think the errors are? Licensing. It's basically telling me, hey, you know what? You've now switched over to evaluation licenses. So it's just kind of going to remind you. And keep in mind that going forward, this UI that we're using, the SDDC Manager UI, is being deprecated. All this functionality that we're accessing is available as part of fleet management and ops. So once you're done with the upgrade, you won't really come to the SDDC Manager that much anymore because you're going to start using VCF operations and fleet management. So we'll go ahead and complete that. There is one additional config drift update that I had that I just went ahead and left in the demo here. I'll go ahead and apply that as well. And I'll just kind of show you here that we have completed our upgrade using the SDDC Manager. We'll go ahead and apply this update. Now, if we come back over here to our slides, I kind of got ahead of myself. So anyway, we just completed the upgrade. So we've been in the SDDC Manager. We completed our upgrade from the SDDC Manager. So now I'm going to go ahead, and before I skipped over this, let me do a quick time check. And so we're going to go ahead now, and we're going to look at updating that vSAN disk version and the VDS version. I'm guessing most of you are probably familiar with this from past experience, but just for those who may be new to like vSAN or may have not seen this before, I just want to show. So I come in here, I click on my cluster, and I go to configure, and I go down here to disk. And under disk management, you'll see up here, it tells me I have 12 disks, they're running version 20. As you go from 8.0, update 3 to 9, it goes to version 21. So it's basically saying you need to update this. So it has a pre-check that you can run, and then you can do the update. The upgrade is just updating metadata. It's not moving data but it is something that you'll want to be aware of because once you do it, you can't go back. So depending on what capabilities you have inside of vSAN and what you're doing, you just want to be aware of that. There is a KB here with more information on that, but we'll go ahead and do the upgrade, and it will just upgrade the disk version. So again, non-disruptive. In reality, it took probably about 3-4 minutes in this simple environment to complete. Once that's done, I go in and I go to my vSphere distributed switches, and then here I can just go ahead and you'll, if I come back here, you'll see it's running 8.0 update 3. It's very easy to update these. Again, the similar kind of caution, once you update them, there's no rollback. So make sure that everything is in your environment is supported with the updated VDS version before you go ahead and do this. So we'll go ahead and do the upgrade here. Okay, so that was pretty much how to update. Now you'll notice we're going to shift gears. We're going to VCF operations. Now, this is where in the documentation, I'm pretty much following the documentation step by step as we go through this. But here you see it's got this step about updating my VCF ops certificate. So one of the things about VCF operations, and if I come back here and actually go to that doc page, this is basically telling me that when VCF operations is deployed, by default, it doesn't have the signed certificate, the private key for the fleet manager as part of its certificate. I've now deployed the fleet manager, I've instantiated my fleet, so I need to replace that certificate with a private key so I can use the fleet manager to deploy additional components. So that's why I need to update the certificate. So to update the certificate, I basically come back here to the demo. I'm going to actually go into my fleet management under certificates, and I'm going to use the certificate management capabilities of the fleet management and ops to do this. So here's my certificate down here, and it's got a date of August 5th right now. So first thing I need to do is configure my certificate authority. So I went ahead and set up a quick Microsoft certificate authority. And so since that's there, I can go ahead and select a certificate, and I'll just go ahead and generate a certificate sign-in request. And that happens pretty quickly, and then I'll go ahead and I'll just replace the certificate. So a couple quick steps, and it will go out and it will update that certificate, and you'll see it's now running with August 7th. So I was able to go in and update my certificate in VCF Ops using fleet management very quickly to make that happen. So now that I've replaced that certificate, I can now go into the fleet management and download binaries. Okay, but didn't we already download binaries? Remember, we went into the SDDC manager, we downloaded binaries. That's for vCenter, for NSX, for ES, for, which one did I miss? There's 3 of them. vCenter, NSX, and ESX. But the fleet management, or what formerly known as ARIA Suite Lifecycle Manager, it has binaries for operations, for automation, for operations for networks. So right now, everything's under fleet management, but the fleet manager is still separate from the SDDC manager. So we do have 2 depots. So this is basically saying, okay, now you've gone in, now we're going into operations into fleet management, and we're going to download the bundles so I can deploy the operations components, like for the operations collector to be more specific. Okay, so I'm going to come in here. I'm going to go into lifecycle, and here's where I can configure the depot here, and you'll see. So actually, this is just, so actually, I guess I left that part of the demo, but after I've downloaded those binaries, so I download the binaries, and once I do it, I'm going to deploy my collector. Before, when we were looking at vSphere, the collector was deployed for us, the certificate was changed. This was all done by the VCF installer. So when I was talking about how I really like the VCF installer, because it does a lot of this for me. But because I'm SDDC manager and I don't have the VCF installer, I'm going to have to do these steps manually. And again, I'm just following the documentation here. So these steps are, just you'll see these in the docs, but just to kind of show you what it looks like. But now I need to deploy my operations collector. So there's going to be an operations collector along with operations running in that management domain. And so to do that, I go into the fleet management. And here, this VCF management, that is the fleet manager, formerly known as ARIA LCM. Below this is VCF instances, which is the SDDC manager, which is where I do lifecycle management using the SDDC manager. We've brought the 2 UIs together. There's still 2 appliances, distinct appliances out there, but the UIs have been integrated. So anyways, to do this, I'll go into manage, and I just go into add nodes. and I'll go ahead and just add a new node. And I'm just going to go ahead and follow the wizard, and you'll notice this looks just like ARIA LCM. It's just plugged into operations. So, and then when I come down here, I get to my components, I'll go ahead and deploy. And the cloud proxy is the same thing as the operations collector. And I give it the name and everything, and we're going to run a pre-check. And it will go ahead and deploy it. And if we get to the old plate here, we can see it being deployed inside the management domain. I just want to take a minute and just kind of show you what my management domain inventory looks like, if you can see this. But you'll see that I have in here my edge cluster, my automation, my collector, my fleet manager. I got all my components, including my ops. So I have automation in here. And so the next step we're going to do is we're actually going to import automation and upgrade it all using fleet management as well. So let's do a quick time check. Okay, yeah, so we're good. We're almost done. We'll open it up for some questions and answer here in just a few minutes. So if you want to hang on. Okay, so now the last piece I want to show is how to import automation, ARIA automation. And I'm going to use the fleet management capability to do this, but I'm going to import automation and I'm going to upgrade it to 9.0. And this would be kind of the final step in this example. If I didn't have an existing automation, I could deploy a new one. But I thought it'd be interesting to kind of see what that upgrade path looks like. So we're going to go ahead and import it and upgrade it, and then we'll license, and then we'll be done. Okay, so to do this, you'll see down here under automation, I have the add button. So here again, I'm in operations under fleet management. I'm going to go ahead and click add. And you'll see here that it is running, actually this is my, okay, this is my operations collector. Let me jump forward, get to this part in the demo. Okay, so here we go. This is where I'm going to add it. Okay, so here I can import from a legacy fleet management, which I'm going to do. And so switching over to ARIA LCM here, I want to show you my environment. So here in my environment, here's the ARIA automation 8.18 running over here in this environment. So we're going to just pull that into fleet management 9. So I go ahead and provide the credentials for the ARIA Suite Lifecycle Manager. It talks to the ARIA Suite Lifecycle Manager to populate these values. There's a number of kind of warnings here. If you can read through the list, it's basically just guidance to make sure things get done and make sure things were taken care of before we do the import. And so we want to verify those things and then do the import. And the import's kind of a two-staged approach. I'm not really sure why it's 2 stages, but it runs that first workflow, then it kicks off this second workflow. It's pretty quick. I mean, the import, this is not far from, maybe took 3-4 minutes to import it. And now it's in there. And so now I come in here, you'll see I now have my automation instance here running as part of fleet management. So I basically pulled it from the old ARIA LCM into the new fleet management 9. And then I go into my binary management and I verify that I have the update binaries here. And so then I can come over here and I can plan my upgrade. I select my version, create my plan, and now I'm just going to go ahead and perform the upgrade. Now it does make me, there are some issues with regards to upgrading. When you leave 8.18, go to 9, there are some capabilities that are left behind. And so it's basically having me to check this box to verify that I understand the details of that. Makes me do an inventory sync, and then I can proceed with the upgrade. And then I'll just go ahead and take all the defaults here as we click through. And it is going to, what it will do as part of the upgrade is kind of similar to the vCenter upgrade. I've got 3 existing nodes running. It's going to deploy 3 new nodes. It's going to copy the data over, change the network configuration. So I'm going to see the old nodes and the new nodes when I'm done. So it kind of follows that same approach as vCenter. It does pre-check. And then we'll go ahead and kick it off. This does take a little bit of time. And so we jump forward, and now we can see we are done with the upgrade. And we're now running 9.0. Okay. Okay, so that's pretty much the VCF upgrade path. So we start with the, I guess let me just recap here some of the things I hope you take away. So when looking at the vSphere upgrade, the VCF installer does a lot for us. When you go to the VCF upgrade, we don't have the installer, so there's a lot more we have to do, particularly around the ARIA suite and upgrading the ARIA suite. Okay. But we are leveraging the SDDC Manager to do the patching and upgrading and guiding us through that process. Okay. So let's go ahead now and let's do the licensing. How many people, anybody here worked with the new licensing scheme, seen how to go into ops and set up the licensing? Okay, I'm going to show you a quick preview of what that looks like. And then we'll be done. We'll open it up to any questions. So coming back here, you'll see here that it does tell me, hey, you got, you're using your temporary license keys, your eval license keys. Come down here, I'm in evaluation mode. So in order to license it, I now have to go to operations. So I come back here to operations, you'll see I have this license management section where I go in. The first thing I need to do is I need to register VCF operations with what's called the business service console. Well, let me back up. There's two modes here. There's the connected mode and the disconnected mode. Okay, the connected mode, you're going to register by basically connecting out to the business services console, providing your credentials, and it will basically transfer and set it up. In disconnected mode, you're going to download a file, take that file, upload it to the business services console, generate your license file, download your license file, and then use it to license. So both the connected, disconnected mode work. I'm going to go ahead and do the disconnected mode because internally the way we don't have access to licenses. We use test licenses, and it just so happens this, the way we do it is through the disconnected mode. But I'll download the registration file, very simple file, and then I'll go out to the business services console where I'll generate my test license, and then I'll download that. Your experience here will be different because this is, because I'm internal, I'm doing test licenses. But you'll download, but you'll end up with a license file similar to what I have here. And then once you have that license file, we come back here, and we will basically import the license file. Browse out, import the license file. And then once that's done, I now have my license. Okay, and in this particular example, I have assigned 1,200 TIBs, 1,200 cores, so I basically have two licenses. I got my core VCF license, and then I got my vSAN add-on license because I'm using vSAN. So now, in order to license my environment, this includes my vCenter, my NSX, my ESX. In order to license all those components, all I need to do is go in here, select my vCenter server, assign a primary license, and then come in here and select it again and assign that add-on license for vSAN. Obviously, if you're not using vSAN, you can skip that. And boom, you're done. And so now if I come back here to my vSphere and I refresh, I'm licensed. No more license keys, no more having to deal with the things. And at this point, that's basically, if we go back here, and so now we move on to day 2. So that's our upgrade experience going from VCF 5.2 to VCF 9.0. Okay, so some key takeaways here. Very important that you understand the concept of the VCF fleet and the VCF instance. We spent a lot of time at the beginning of this presentation talking about the fleet, the instance, and design considerations. You'll want to think that through before you start upgrading because, you know, are you going to have one fleet? You're going to have two fleets? Are they going to be within a region, across a region? Are you going to have a single node ops? You're going to have a multi-node ops? There's a lot of things that go into to move into VCF 9 and deploying a private cloud. It'd be very easy to go in and just take a vSphere environment, upgrade it, create a fleet, and then realize after you're done that maybe you should have done it different, or maybe a different order, or maybe picked a different vCenter. So understand that concept of fleet and the instance. And take the time to prepare. Go through the prerequisites. We have a lot of information out there. We have spreadsheets, we got documentation, a lot of stuff to help you design and prepare. And then we have everything's documented in our documentation for both that vSphere and that VCF example. And so with that, just again, a reminder where you can go get more information, other sessions. If you miss these sessions, everything's recorded. They will be available online for playback. And with that, thanks for sticking with us. It's been 90 minutes of wonderful